and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I am joined by the good old Nicolò Grasso to review Emilia Pérez, Netflix's big awards contender this year. The film got rave reviews coming out of the Cannes Film Festival, but on release has been reanalyzed to be a potentially more problematic feature than originally noted. Today, myself and Nicolò Grasso break down the film, our struggles with its narrative, its production, and come to a conclusion on where we stand on it. This is undeniably a pretty complex film to break down. It is about a Mexican cartel leader who tries to start a brand new life with the help of a lawyer after gender confirmation surgery, but it's ultimately a film with quite a bit to discuss and quite a bit of controversy to get into. Of course, myself and Nicolò can only give our own perspectives on the film. We highly encourage you seek out voices more connected to the subject matter, but still we wanted to come on and discuss our feelings about the film, so that is going to be our episode today. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. Now let's get to our review of Emilia Pérez. Okay, Nick, and I will go ahead and start our conversation on Emilia Pérez, because this is going to be kind of a weird conversation to have with us. I think we just need to be very explicit up top that neither of us are from Mexico. We don't necessarily have that cultural background baked into our life experiences. Neither of us identify as trans. So there's going to be a lot within this film. I think it's very important to say that we're not necessarily going to be the best voices on. We're not necessarily going to be able to engage with. I think that's one of the biggest issues surrounding the conversation around this movie, is that a lot of critics who went to Cannes and went to these early festivals maybe didn't have some of these experiences. It didn't necessarily look at this film through a critical lens in that authentic way, leading maybe to some frustrations when it released wide. And now, luckily, it is out, and there's tons of great voices that represent these communities that are out there breaking down the film. So cannot express enough. Highly recommend you at home. Maybe listen to this, have some laughs with us, enjoy what we're saying, but then go and check out some of those voices, because they're going to be much more worthwhile than what we are presenting today here. But starting off with Emilia Pérez on Netflix. A weird film, isn't it? This is gonna be a weird conversation, I think, especially in the early bit, to kind of break down and fully understand. A musical drama about a lawyer who gets hired by this cartel leader to help her undergo gender confirmation surgery. That is not the term they use in the film, just to be very clear. But gender confirmation surgery, and have her family get relocated to, I believe it's Switzerland, to be safe. And then she decides, no, actually, I want them back in Mexico. There's a few angles I guess we can kind of tackle this from. I will say, as a musical, not the biggest fan here. Some of the songs are okay, but I think every single song sequence pretty much is shot and edited pretty poorly. I think this is not that captivating of a musical. I don't think necessarily the story progresses greatly in these songs. It tries to be a little bit campy, I even want to say, here and there, and it just didn't really land for me. And then you get the drama, and the drama is I'm not viscerally upset personally by this drama or by this story. This is not one of those where I'm going to come in with just seething venom of anger for what this film presents or is. But I think one of the biggest criticisms I'll start out with is just the lack of character. Every single one of these characters are super, super one note, cliched, tying them to very, very specific bits of trauma almost, and little bits of just, there's a complete lack of personality, a complete lack of soul. These don't feel like real people. And in a film that I think is so dedicated to trying to build itself off the back of real human connection and real human connections and souls and journeys. You have this lawyer who wants to be more, and she gets this opportunity, and she walks this line between doing what's right or wrong. You get this former cartel leader who is dealing with both her new identity and accepting that, but also is trying to comprehend her past and figure out both a way forward that addresses what is behind her. This family that has this trauma because they think Selena Gomez's character thinks her husband, and the kids think their dad, has died tragically, and they're trying to find a path forward. This film is about each one of these characters transforming right into a new world, into a new life. I found within that, though, there's just such a lack of real humanity, of real human character, of real human depth, that I really was, at the end of this, I don't think it's technically the worst film ever made. I don't think that we'll get to the performances in a bit, but like I don't think anything here I would point at as being like, oh, that's laughably bad. I wouldn't. This is not like Bohemian Rhapsody where I'd point at that and say like this film is awful and like I'm laughing at it and it's just like an embarrassment of a film. I wouldn't say that, but I ended up just feeling like, what are we really getting from this? What is really being achieved? Especially clocking in at nearly 2 hours 20 minutes. It was one of those I really struggle to identify a lot of areas that either are just so drastically, terribly, horrifically wrong or that are really successful. Nick, I would love if you could provide some guidance with your opening thoughts, and then maybe we'll get into some more specifics as we go along.
Sure, I'll do my best. I will say I was just very disappointed by the film because it has incredible potential in so many areas. Everything that you talked about in terms of the characters, especially, I think on paper this should be a success. This should be a fun film, an exciting film, a bold film that's trying to say something new and interesting moving forward. Trans representation, talking about some very serious issues in Mexico about corruption, about murder, about traumas, and finding some sort of um, closure and catharsis with all of the pain that you've experienced in your previous life. Exactly like you mentioned, like all those characters are transforming and changing, some in more literal ways than others, of course. But I just felt like this movie did nothing with it, especially for something that's over 2 hours long, which is insulting to just like be this long winded and have very little to say about this subjects, and especially in the way that it's told, which is kind of fascinating because we both know this got very high acclaim at Cannes where it premiered, and even at TIFF when it had its screening there. Generally speaking, it got positive reception, and I heard so many things about the music is great, such a crazy film, it's insane, the camera work, like what they do with this, with the choreography and the movement, it's fantastic. And I will give them that this thing literally only applies to one scene, which is the scene that they milk out in all of the trailers, including the song, which is El Mal, sung by Zoe Saldana primarily. But other than that, everything else felt so flat. Honestly, I swear, if we weren't doing this podcast, if we weren't having this conversation, 15 minutes into the movie, I was like, this is bullshit. I wish I could stop. I was like 2 more hours, like I don't want to do this. Oh, I regret this. This is not gonna work. Um I don't even like I agree with you. Nothing is inherently terrible in here. It's just such a waste of everyone's talent, of misusing people's talent. Because I think we'll get more deeper into the cast later on, which I think is where some of the shining parts are, as well as some of the bigger disappointments. But just overall, first thoughts. Um, it might be my least favorite film of the year, just by how angry I felt like watching it. I was like, I'm so tired. I'm feeling the energy being sapped from my body. This is a vampire of a motion picture, which feed and I do find it incredibly exploitative, which will be interesting. I have a friend of mine who's Mexican. We were talking about this movie actually today when we met, and I told him a little bit about the film and the representation of Mexico from my perspective, at least, and he was very tired by it, by the way it is portrayed many, many times in the film. And the last thing I will add for now is that I was watching in preparation some interviews with Jacques Audiard. He had like one of those Netflix talks, post screening talks with Guillermo del Toro. And he wanted to make an opera or an operetta, which is an interesting idea. And I think it fails on all levels. He wanted to make a genre bending film, which is like it's a melodrama, it's a telenovela, it's a cartel crime film, and I think it fails on all those levels. It's neither exciting nor emotional nor campy like what you were saying, and funny to just like get lost in all these characters' dramas. It's like I don't care. I barely care about anyone here. So yeah, I'm excited to delve deeper into this film, but I don't know if I can show guidance. I'll probably just drag you further into negativity with this one.
No, you did good. And I think it's probably, apologies to any big Emilia Perez stands out there. This might not be the episode for you. I think it's important. This is from a French cis director, right? Like, this is not a
Yeah.
director who has connection to the source material and the content he is looking at here, really, in like any way. This is not his culture. This is not his identity. This is not his job. This is nothing tied to him beyond concept. So it is understandable then, not excusable, but understandable why so much of this comes down to cliches and comes down to inaccurate representations. There's tons of writing you can find out there about how this is inaccurate when showcasing the trans experience. Like, literally, like, not just like on this like emotional level of how it feels to be trans, but like just base core facts of what it is like.
Science. Just science.
Behind it is just wrong. In Mexico, it boils down to, again, this very cliched story of the cartel and of violence and of drugs, once again putting this country in that lens and only in that lens, when it is so much more than that. I think those are ideas and those are perspectives that thankfully we are seeing throughout in cinema are getting more recognized and more understood, the actual vibrancy and actual truth behind these circumstances. But it doesn't excuse and doesn't change the fact that in this film, it presents a very, very basic understanding of both of these topics. I think it's interesting the telenovela aspect of this, because I have to compare it then to Pedro Almodovar's work, which is very at points, specifically his film this year, actually his English language debut, The Room Next Door. There are points in that where it gets very, very telenovela, and it's dialogue and it's drama, where it gets very over the top and almost kind of campy in some ways. And throughout his filmography, this is something you see over and over again. But he clearly understands that genre in a way to where it works. It works for what he's going for. He's building on top of that. It is something that is so core, obviously, to how Almodovar views art. Probably, I assume, from his experience with the genre growing up and living in Mexico. It is something that you can just so clearly see. And if there's kind of a thesis we've developed on ClapperCast, I want to say, over the last number of years, it's the importance of authenticity behind the camera. If you do not have the authenticity, it shows. And it shows in a film like Emilia Pérez. Because not only does it boil it down to these cliches and some problematic cliches, and again, multiple aspects. This is not just saying just in the trans way or even just in the Mexico way. There is so much here that gets boiled down. I think femininity in this film is very strange how it's handled. Even removed from the trans circumstances, these characters, there's no character. This lawyer, you know nothing about her. You know nothing about any of these characters beyond just these very simplistic roles in the plot that, again, goes on for 2 hours and 20 minutes long. It is such a pain at times to get through. I think that's what it boils down to me. And again, in the sense that I understand why, and not to shit on anyone who likes this film and not to disparage the critics who go to festivals, but like, I get why straight white men typically are the ones at these festivals who have no experience also with these circumstances and get wrapped up in this drama in a similar way. I imagine the director is also. Similarly to how, like, when a queer film plays at a festival, I get really frustrated with the conversation surrounding it, because when I watch it, I'm like, no, you completely missed the point, and here's why you misjudged it. Like, I get why these groups are this way, and I think it's frustrating to see how much they control the narrative. The fact that this film is like being projected as a best picture player is like fucking laughable. The fact that this is a best international picture, this is what Mexico is like, has submitted largely based on the hype around it to represent their country, is laughable.
Is
Yes?
it Mexico or is it France, actually?
Mexico.
Oh, no.
The rules behind
Why?
that are so odd, but this is just like their biggest one with hype, and France doesn't care. France will do whatever they want. So I get why this went with Mexico, but like, it is so embarrassing in a way that this is a film. I saw a Letterboxd review comparing this to Crash 2005, I want to say. I feel that. Again, I'm not viscerally angry with this film as I am with like Crash or certain other films, but like, it is so clear that it's such a reductive piece of cinema, and we have put it on a pedestal and projected something without critical thought and without a care for the authenticity, in a way that is frustrating. But again, like, beyond that, I think it's important to mention that the film itself, like, beyond, even if, let's say, let's, cast aside all this thought of it being somewhat problematic, of it being a bad representation of these things with the context we understand, the film itself is also just not good. I think that was a great time to get into performances because I was hyped. The number one thing people say about this film is, oh my God, the performances are incredible. You won't believe what Selena Gomez does here. And I will agree, I didn't believe what she did because she is fucking awful here. What is happening? She can barely do the accent. She does not have like really a lot of great emotions. I think the main actress, Carla Sofia Gascon, is
Mhm.
pretty good. I think she definitely has some moments where she shines. I think her character is horribly written, but I think she has some good emotions. Zoe Saldana, we'll get there with our question of the week today. I didn't think she was bad. I didn't think she was great. She really comes alive in the musical performances that I think are not really good musical performances.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think in a film that, especially though, when we talk about like the core technical, like, these are good performances. I really disagree with that statement. I would not put this in any of my acting lineups, tragically. I don't know if you feel differently.
I kind of do actually. Like that's the thing that most surprised me, and it's probably the only thing that kept me going in this film were the performances. I think it is one of those cases where a very good actor elevates shitty material, and I think Carla Sofia Gascon absolutely does that here. Um, Even though I really hate what they do with the voice about, like, the changing of like sound, like higher pitch to sound more feminine and good and pure, and then but when she, she gets a little bit mad, that's when the previous voice comes back on. It's like, no, fuck that. Like, how did she even allow this? Honestly, in terms of just like, it probably sounded good on paper and you get convinced by the director, but it's like, it's so misguided, so misguided. But that being said, I do really think she was just very charismatic as a presence. I think also the humor she delivers, a lot of genuine moments of just like chuckles and laughs that helped during this film, and all those, and the tenderness that she has, especially in the second half, like trying to reconnect with the family, trying to find, some connection and some links with her children and her ex-wife, or still wife. I don't know how that works when someone dies. Let's say ex-wife. She's going on to greener pastures with Edgar Ramirez, who's barely in the film and does nothing except at the end, but we'll get to that later. Um, like, I really liked her, and I also really liked Zoe Saldana in this one, especially like you mentioned during the song and dance moments. She's fluid, she's agile. You can just hear those words, just especially in El Mal, which is the standout sequence of the film. In the way it's actually shot, I thought it was engaging with the robot arm, kind of like weaving around. I thought the lyrics were also very good, and the way they use it in the film. Again, it goes nowhere. What they talk about in that song goes nowhere. We'll get to it in a bit. Um, but just her, it was so natural. And also shout out because, like, when they gave the Palm, like Palm Best Actress, I don't know what the actual word is. It's like a piece of paper, I believe. But when they gave Best Actress at Cannes, they gave it to Carla Sofia, Zoe. They gave it to Selena Gomez, which we'll talk about in a second, and also Adriana Paz, who comes into the movie very late but actually manages to have lasting impression. I thought she was probably the most genuine dramatic performer in here, even though she is kind of relegated to doing a lot of like sad wife, mopey melodrama things. I think she does it very well, and she's very genuine, and she gets the last spoilers. Can we get into spoilers maybe a little bit?
Yeah, let's get into spoilers.
She has the final scene of the movie, which I think, if it weren't for her, I would have like flipped the table. What the fuck are we doing here with this ending? And she really sold it. Selena Gomez, I'm not a fan of her, just generally speaking. Even in something like I don't care about her music, uh, except for like the Charlie Puth song she collaborated with or whatever it was. Um,
Have you seen Only Murders in the Building?
I think she's fine in that. She's
Okay.
like the weakest link for me, mainly because she's. I was always like watching it. I was like, is it her or is it the character? Because it's incredibly one note. It's incredibly one note. And I would say in that case, it's more the character, honestly, than her performance. But in here,
Not a big rainy day in New York, Stan.
we don't talk about that film. We don't talk about that film. Um, I do like Spring Breakers, though. I do like Spring Breakers. Say that. But in this film, I don't think it's necessary that she gives a bad performance, but more so that she's completely miscast to the point of her like actually admitting and saying, "I don't like the way I speak Spanish in this film. I was uncomfortable." You can tell you can tell she's incredibly uncomfortable in this film, even though they try to justify it as, well, she's American. Jessie is actually Jessica, and she comes from the States, so she speaks like 10% English in the film. But every time she has to speak Spanish, you can tell it's a pain. It's as if I were to act in a movie speaking German. It's like I can kind of say the words. It's not gonna sound right. It's not gonna be good. It's so disappointing. It's such a shame because I think she's probably the best singer out of the cast, and she manages to have the smallest impact in any way during the songs, during the musical numbers, which they go all out for. They try to make them the most stylish musical numbers, and I think they all fall flat. There's one sequence, especially, I forgot the name of the song. It's like Mi Camino, I believe, which is sung inside a nightclub, which is a cool idea, but they do some tricks with like using monitors and reflections and whatnot that just bothered me. It looked ugly and kind of off instead of looking dreamy and nice. So yeah, no, the cast I would say they are my favorite part of the film. They kind of helped make this more watchable than it is, which is not the best compliment.
Sure. I mean, I do want to give really like props to Carla. I would
Mm,
say any emotional moment I felt an emotion from this film. And you mentioned yes, she gives a great levity at times, but I do also think like when it comes to these moments of honest reflection and emotion, she does her best with a bad script. She really does. And her character is a rich one, right? Not that it's well written. Not that you see actually the evolution of like the character on the inside to justify like everything, but when she's like looking back at the trauma and the violence she had in her life, and she's really questioning how to move forward with that, in a way that like uh, feels right to her, let's say. There are moments where I'm like, yeah, I empathize with this character. There's something here that we're scratching at that is worthwhile. I think a lot of my issues with this, beyond again the screenplay and everything, comes down to it being a musical. I think this being a musical is like a really bad choice. Number one, the director, again, for all of his faults we've already mentioned, and it's funny, I do like the director overall, but he's also not experienced with musicals, so like bizarre choice there for him to be the one helming a musical. And also I just think like this is a film that thrives, every emotional moment it thrives in is one of like quiet human connection and understanding and empathy. This trans woman talking about how from childhood she felt like she needed to do this. This is finally her being herself. 4 years later, 3 years later, however long it is, her talking about how she can finally live as her authentic self. It's worth every moment. Her talking to Rita about like, this is something that happened in my past. I want to make it right. How do I do this? Because I see people walking around saying, you know, my loved one is missing. And I know where his body is. How do I reckon with that to move forward? I miss my children. I want to connect with them, but they don't know it's me. How do I reckon with that? These are all like beautiful little, in a better screenplay, again, ignoring the major issues of the film. These are all like really touching ideas for a character. But whenever it feels like we're just about to kind of get to the heart of that, we have to jump into a musical number that I think is just like on an idea, on a logic standpoint, so wrong for how this film should operate emotionally. You consistently take these small moments and blow them up to be these grand expressions, but the idea you're expressing, it never, the music always undercuts the actual impact of what it's presenting, which I just feel like is super frustrating. Um, I think that's what really frustrates me about this film. I wish I could just say it's like a 1 star, like, oh, this is a pile of absolute shit with no good ideas. Like, there is something at the heart here that with a different voice, with more understanding, with more empathy, with more authenticity, especially, there is things here that really could be engaging and worthwhile, but the film just squanders it at every point for a variety of reasons. Um, and I think it's just like, I really wish the message we got from this film widely from people seeing it is like demanding more. That we're not
Hmm.
accepting this as just being like, this is what cinema is and this is what representation is. Because like there is richness here, but it cannot come out in this form, both due to the genre it belongs to, the voices behind the project. And it's so frustrating that we've just accepted this and we're rewarding this and we're like, yes, this is great. Because like, no, it's not. Um, I don't know. But when I think about the narrative structure itself, I just think the musical was like such a mistake. I get why to a point at sometimes because some of the songs like you can see the vision for, but I just think it was the wrong decision here.
It's just unfocused. Like
Yeah.
I think out of every character you could make a nice 2 hour, maybe even shorter movie. And in here you have so many characters. I mean, just like four major characters that don't get the time they deserve. I think Emilia Perez, also being like the namesake of the film, of course, she's the only one that gets some interesting characterizations, as you mentioned, because otherwise everything else, and it doesn't feel like it's intentional on a narrative level. Everything else feels like it's never truly evolving, despite the willingness for change. For instance, with Rita, the lawyer, she starts off as someone who's forced to take complicated clients, let's just say criminals even, to protect them because that's part of the job, underpaid, undervalued, and all that. And she ends up doing kind of the same with this cartel leader. And then she ends up doing the same again 4 years later when she collaborates with Emilia Perez and they start this non-profit organization, but they need funding from criminal politicians, which is a nice statement. Like I like the idea of, and again, like the reason why El Mal is the only good song for me, in my opinion, is that it's the only one where it feels like they use the idea of a musical of, you go into this fantasy realm to express your emotions you cannot really put into the real world in a way that's very literal. Like she has to take it on her chin. I think that's a saying, kind of like, work with these people, take the money because you need it, but I will recognize and will never forget all the bad that you've done, all of the el mal that you are in this world. But then that's it. That's it. So that's like, and then they do the job and they do a nice work. That's it. It's like, okay, guess it's fine. Like all of those characters are so flat in the end, and it's like on paper they have so much richness and so much potential, which again adds to my frustration watching it because I wanted more. Even the entire idea of Selena Gomez's character, like the wife who's been abandoned, who had this fling in the past, and she reconnects with this man who's a criminal himself, and they start this new fling, and then she wants to get married to him, and all of that. It's interesting, but I want to say he barely like this. I don't know the name of the character, like the Edgar Ramirez character. Is like I don't think he even has a line of dialogue until like the climax of the film. I was watching those scenes with him and I was like, "Is that Edgar Ramirez?" It's like you never really get a nice shot. I was like, "Is that him? Why is he in this movie in this role, which is so secondary?" Um, and that entire storyline devolves into the typical cartel, there's the violence and there's the gunfight, which I found to be very tasteless. It actually bothered me when it veers into, like, oh, they end up kidnapping Emilia and they torture her and remove her fingers. I was like, what the fuck is this movie turned into? Like, it's so borderline mean spirited, especially with the idea that you want to show a movie about people changing and transforming with the hope and dream maybe that the country can change and heal and transform, but ultimately it never feels like they do. And the one that's most um hurt by wanting to be a better person is Emilia Perez, which just felt so off and so just icky. I don't know how you felt about just where the story
Absolutely.
goes.
The film continually, even beyond that point, but I mean, that's an excellent example of it, continually seems to come back to this idea of like, Amelia was somehow like, the choice she made to transition like has led to pain and led to suffering and something people will suffer for, which is like such a barbaric message for a film like this to present, but it's something that's like continually brought up. I think that the character of Emilia is also interesting because like there is this idea of transforming for the better, and even past like obviously the gender confirmation surgery, there is also her transformation from being this violent cartel leader to being this loving family figure who isn't really violent. That evolution is like never shown. It's completely told. Like you have no idea why Emilia was like this violent leader who murdered so many people and then just like was like, I'm done with this. It's just you meet her at the end of that journey. It's a very weird character lack of evolution. It's just like, just trust me, like she's changed. It's like, why? But even just, I mean, again, we're not the best trans voices, but it continuously not only mentions that like her transition is something that's caused suffering for a lot of people, but like also continually try to show like her transformations like a costume almost like put on top of who she really is, which is this guy, which is like weird. You have the whole scene of her kids being like, I can smell that you're like my dad, and it's like okay, that's weird. And like it just continuously like feels to me very disrespectful and very like it never accepts the surgery and it never accepts this new identity. Always is kind of like this is a mask put on who you really are, and because you try to put that mask on and you try to do this thing that is selfish, and it's going to cause suffering and pain for a lot of people you care about, which again is just like so barbaric. It's like unimaginable that this is put out wide on Netflix, and his conversation of being an awards contender, but here we are. It's so strange and misguided, especially in a time where I feel like so many people want to tout like you'll get a film like Green Book that comes out that has like good intentions, you could say, but people are like, no, this is problematic for all these reasons and we're going to reject this film because we're going to use critical thought to break down the representation within it. And it's like this film comes along and so many people are like, oh, wow, life-changing, incredible. It's like, what are we doing? This is just like Green Book. Dare I say kind of even worse than Green Book. Like
Worse.
this is like there's so many films that come out that just like get torn to shreds, and then this one comes out and people are like, well, it's kind of good. It's just like I don't know why, but this to me is like how I will view Emilia Perez is on the same level I view like, or in the same genre, I should say, as I view those types of films where it's just like, yes, do I think this has good intentions? Probably, right? Like, I don't think this is a film that is necessarily, yeah, yes, in execution. I don't think though, like, well, I don't know, I guess. It's odd. It's an odd one. But I think that this is a film that is just so misguided is the best terminology I would say on every level.
Mm,
But as you mentioned, I think the representation within it is like really fucking poor. I think I will just be as explicit as possible on that.
I think just in general, especially like if we had this conversation like an hour ago, I would have had different opinions. But I ended up like watching these interviews with the director, and I'm like, I kind of actually dislike the movie more now after listening to him talk. Um, it feels like it's almost this fetishization of both Mexico and just the trans experience. Because the way that he ended up like making this movie and getting inspired is that he was reading a novel. I don't remember which. I think it's actually mentioned maybe in the end credits of the film, where there is a chapter in which a cartel leader wants to transition as a woman, and that's kind of it. And he was like, ooh, this is interesting. I want to make a movie about that. And since he was toying around with the idea of making an opera in the actual sense of like a stage opera, because there's no contemporary ones that are interesting and blah blah blah, he ended up making Emilia Perez, which turned into a feature film actually. I'm like, I don't know, man. And it's very telling that this was shot all in Paris, I believe, or at least like in France, in studios,
On a
indoors,
soundstage, yeah.
on a soundstage. He went to Mexico City. He says this in the interview with Del Toro. He went to Mexico City 3 times with the crew, and he was like, I needed to be basically he says like I needed to be more stylized, and like we couldn't do these things in the real place the way it's made because the way I was imagining it is like you are creating a fantasy version of Mexico in your head, and of like it's a fetishization of it's oh I've been to Mexico. I've seen it. I've seen Sicario. I know how these things work. I've seen Amores Perros. I know how these things work. Right? That's how it feels like. It is the movie version of how Mexico is, and it is perpetuating these stereotypes in a way that's very disappointing. And I, especially hearing why I shot everything in the studio instead of just being like, oh, I want to have the artifice of a stage musical, and that's how the operas are made, which he talks about that as well. It's like operas are all fake, so I needed a fake space. But it's like I don't know, man. Like it felt, I don't know, like it felt wrong. It irked me the wrong way.
Also, to get like a Hollywood like A-list actors who like I don't know, it's all very. I'm struggling for the right word, but it all feels very like artificial. Like that's not the right word for it. It's what
It's
you're getting at.
calculated. It's almost like,
Yes,
especially after hearing all of these conversations about the Oscars and pushing it as an awards contender, it's like where did this start? Why did it start? It feels like we are willing this to be that,
yeah,
when there's no reason for it to be that. I think it
because
would still
yeah.
work as its own film. Like, it's just a movie that exists, comes out on Netflix, that's it. Instead of trying to push it for Academy Awards.
We don't have enough time to get into the politics of awards season when it
You're
comes to
right.
critics
You're right.
who spend thousands and thousands of dollars to fly to Cannes and like need to have best picture contenders there to drum up hype for their own content. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because of how it all works. We don't need to get into that right now. But it's not just calculated, but like I don't get the vibe that he was creating this film just like I'm gonna make some cheap shit for the Oscars. Like I think he truly thinks he's doing like remarkable work. I think this film truly is like smelling its own farts when it's like this film is going to showcase the complexity, the authentic complexity of the trans experience in this time. And this is going to be this grand political, beautiful statement that is going to like heal the world. That's the vibe I get from this. Yes, it's calculated, but it's in a way that's like almost comedically lacking self-awareness. Um, yeah, this film is so bad. like, I came into this conversation more, I would say, melancholy than like depressed about it. But like, no, this film like is trash. Actually, like, it really
Hey,
is.
say it
I
loud
don't
and
know. It's
proud.
not one of the worst of the year. I did sit through the JoJo Siwa horror movie, but like it is one of the worst of the year. I mean, this is embarrassing, and I can only, I guess, pray that all these Oscar pundits who are still just so heavily, even after these reactions, so heavily trying to be like, no, guys, it's good and it's gonna get in Best Picture, guys, it's gonna do it. Please trust me. I can only hope they're wrong because like this, it would just be like it would be like Crash, where I'm just like, this is like a disgrace to get into. I mean, it's going to win Best International Feature. That's where we are from that, sadly. But I don't need it to be doing anything more than that because it is quite poor. I like, even for me, the performances are like good at the best. Carla's really good, but like I wouldn't personally put her in the Best Actress lineup or Best Supporting Actress, wherever she would fall in that. Like, I think at best this film is like good. At worst is like a disgrace to cinema. So I guess I'm not a big fan. Nick,
Nice phrase. Nice phrase,
any
though.
last things you would like to get into about Emilia Perez today?
I think the last thing I will say is that, like, speaking of film being a musical, it has people that have worked on one of my favorite films of the decade, which is Annette de Cara. Love Annette. That's the shit, man. I don't know what the ClapperCast stance is, the public statement on it, but I love Annette. And that's a film that is properly an operetta, however you want to call it, however you want to define it, because it has the melodrama that actually works. It has the artifice, which is put in the forefront. It has actually interesting themes that it focuses on. It has a couple of very strong ideas and it goes through with them. I think this movie, it's not that it feels ashamed of being a musical. It's that it's so even differently from something like Joker 2, which I know we didn't talk about it, frankly, but which I saw in the cinemas last month. Like, even that movie managed to have, I don't know, like, I get why it was a musical. Didn't work in practice, but I get it. In this one, I completely agree with what you said earlier. Like, I think you make this into a normal drama, kind of like remove the songs, works fine, probably even better than it does right now. Just choose what you want to be. Do you want to be a proper musical where you have Zoe Saldana like dancing on tables, people go to the rhythm of her and then she throws them around the room, but it's still all in their fantasy? Or do you want to have the opera where Emilia is singing very softly to her kid who's like, oh, you smell like papa, and those little things? Like, choose. There's like this constant jumping back and forth. It doesn't feel like, I mean, it's probably meant to be like the variety of styles. The movie's constantly changing and evolving and moving from genre to genre. It's like, nah, man. Like, I'm watching it, I'm like, this is whiplash. Not to mention, we haven't talked about the most instantly iconic scene of the year in this movie, which is the song La Vaginoplastia, which is when Rita in the opening of the film goes to a Thai gender assignment surgery place, whatever, and they gleefully talk about like rhinoplasty, vaginoplasty. We do it all, man to penis, penis to man, woman, vagina, all those things. Like ha ha ha, and everyone's just like laughing, and it's like, what musical is this? Like this doesn't fit at all with the rest of the tone of the film. Which, if the idea is what he was saying of just like different styles, it doesn't work. It's just a
Yeah.
slap in the face.
And then you get into, I forget the song, but then it goes like, if she's a she will just be a he. If he's a wolf, he'll be a wolf. It was bad. It was
Yeah,
not
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Not good. Sadly, they did Netflix. Shout out Netflix did send me a vinyl of certain songs from this. That
Nice.
song, man to penis to vagina, vagina to penis, was not on the vinyl. I'm so sad. But alas, yeah, it's shocking. I mean, if you like, I guess if you just want a shocking experience, turn it off for the last third. Like, as you mentioned, make this not a musical. Hire a completely different cast and crew outside of Carla and make it like 75 minutes and
Ooh,
cut the third act
perfect.
just completely. Just snip like probably even most of the second half in general out. I think it'd be, getting up there. um, yeah,
Focus
not
on
great as is.
Emilia. Focus on
Yes.
wanting to do right. Focus on trying to atone for her sins. Focus on the romance, because I thought those couple of scenes of her relationship with, I'm blanking on the name,
Yeah.
by Tatiana Paz. Um, those moments I thought were very tender, and I wish there was more of that in the film. I wish the movie was more about that. That could have been a nice little
Yeah.
film and different
What
as
a
well.
strange choice to narratively focus on Rita other than Amelia. I get to
And
a point.
constantly saying like she's perfect, she changed my life, like constantly making her be this sort of saint, and then
Yeah.
turning Emilia into a martyr, which is like always the fucking thing that happens with like the big awards queer films. Is always like
Oh,
someone's
yeah.
gotta die and be a simple, okay?
Oh, and it has to be
Okay, no happy
tortured
endings.
also. Has to be literally tortured. Um,
That bothered me
yeah.
so much when they show it. I was like, I can't believe they're actually doing it. Like it, I felt rage in that moment. It's like, this is so cruel. You wrote this, man.
Yeah.
They could have sent a Polaroid of her like beaten up or something, and that would have been like okay. It's like, oh no, they've cut off like 3 fingers even or something like that. And when they cut back to her in the shed, she's like actively still bleeding. They didn't even like put a tourniquet or
Yeah.
something. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? What is
They
this
also have
film?
the weird, like, villainous turn almost from Amelia when she like gets really possessive of Selena Gomez and the
It's because
family.
the
Like,
man is
that's
still
weird.
there. The man is
Yeah,
still
no,
there.
well,
It's
and
still,
well,
the
the voice
vault is
comes
still
out. The voice
working.
comes out. Let's be clear to show. It's like, what are we doing? It's crazy. See, just when you say like,
It's like,
a movie is really bad, and this is like a really good like test for people, and it's a thing that no one does, and people should is just say the plot out loud. Just say what happens in the film, and if it sounds like that is unbelievable and problematic and should not be in a film in 2024, there's probably an issue there, right? Like, if you're laughing while you're just saying what happens and you're like, that's insane, it means it's a bad movie. And I think this proves Emilia Pérez is a bad movie.
Like, it's a movie in 2024 that ends with three major characters just dying in a car crash. It's the most
Whew.
unceremonious way where it happened. And I was like, oh, she got out? Maybe?
Well, I
Something good
guess.
happened. And then it's like, no, they're dead. I was like, okay, like we're doing this. Okay, that's how the movie ends. They're all dead.
It feels very 2003. If this movie came out in
Yeah.
2003, like fully would not bat an eye. I'd be like, yeah, that was problematic at the time. Like that was wild that we were there, but like that is how it feels. It definitely does not feel 2024 in like multiple ways. Um,
No, especially considering the types of trans movies we've had this year and
yeah,
the past like 5 years, let's say. Just like take all of those movies, take the craft behind them, take the stories, the meaning, etc. And people are like, you know what, we're gonna champion Emilia Perez. That's a story I can get behind, which is reinforcing all of those stereotypes that we've seen in the decades repeated over and over again. There is a smidge of like positivity about it. I do think ultimately you finish the movie, and I think it's impossible to not praise both the character and the performance of Emilia Perez slash Carlos Gascon. I think everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, she's good. She gives good performance, good characters, nice and everything." But it's just the way it's portrayed that's so, like you said, 2003, like, like fucking Blind Side and all those like movies of fetishizing the minority and turning them into these religious symbols for people to rally behind instead of being the real people that they could be, like living and breathing and enjoying life. It feels cruel. It genuinely feels cruel. I don't care what people
yeah,
say. Like, we're still talking about a man who sits down at his fucking laptop, just like typing away these words. He's like, he can change them. I don't want this to turn into misery, where it's just like Jacques Audiard tied on my bed, just like change the ending. But that's the thing. Like, it's fiction at the end of the day. You have the power of molding the narrative in ways that could be different, better, or more important. And it feels like he needed someone behind this to kind of like rein him in a little bit. And the fact that he
yeah.
has the acclaim, the fame behind it, the support to make this movie the way it is now. Ah,
Yeah, I don't know. I do think people could come away from this, and where I think obviously you will come away with like, Carl is great and blah blah blah. Like, I do think people will walk away from this though with like a problematic view of like what it means to be trans. Like, I do think it is like harmful, and I don't think it's just like lackluster in its context and its layers. I think it's like actively could be harmful for certain people. It's wild. I mean, I don't think this film is perfect, but we're almost 10 years out of like a Fantastic Woman. I remember when that was like
oh,
came out
yeah.
and it was like this is like a big moment, this big movement. But like imagine a filmmaker like Isabel Sandoval if she had access to make a film like this. I mean, think about the soul and the heart that she could give a project like this. Like it's
Yeah.
so frustrating. It's frustrating that just got made, but like that everyone, and I'm just a broken record. I'm gonna end it, I promise. But like, it's frustrating that everyone just accepted this because we shouldn't be accepting this. But that's what we do. We accept when Jane Campion makes shitty queer films because like we love Jane Campion, yay! Like we love that shit. We love that shit. So I don't know. Who am I to say? But
The last thing I will say, I highly recommend people check out the book Corpses, Fools, and Monsters, which is about the history of transness in cinema, which talks about the harmful representation of trans people in cinema. And I mean, it came out before this movie was released, sadly, because I would have loved a teeny tiny mention of this fucking film in it, because it does ultimately have all of those little things of like the trans person never really changes. There's always part of the previous gender, previous life inside of them. the trans person as a monster, as a criminal. You have all of those moments that you were talking about of just the voice changing and the violence coming back out towards the end. Um, yeah, it's like, they're ticking so many of the boxes. It's so, you're right. It is more potentially more dangerous. Yeah, that sucks.
Boy, what a fun episode. Just for context for people, why we chose this, and I had no idea what this was about. I don't read synopsis, I don't watch trailers, so I had no idea what this one was about. Awards season coverage is hell on this podcast because we have people from so many different places. Like, release dates do not work out. I see films way early, then like in Italy, it's gonna be like, oh, in January, at the end of January, this film, like, it does not work out for us. So this being on Netflix was like, oh, that's one we can actually review. Thank God it
It's out
was
in
Emilia
cinemas
Pérez.
here. You can watch it in the cinemas if you want here
Oh,
in Germany right
God.
now.
Awful. If you want to watch Emilia Pérez and you're in the States or you're in a lot of countries, it's on Netflix. If not, it should be playing in cinemas wherever you are. If you want to venture out after this glowing review. Let's get to our question of the week. Zoe Saldana, we agree, is good in this film. I think at least we both agree on that. Looking at her filmography, because we've talked a lot about her actually this year on our Summer Blockbuster series, what is our favorite performance of hers? I will start out because as the resident Navi head, aka I watched Avatar, 3 different cuts of Avatar in 1 week for a podcast this year. I'm going to go with her in Avatar. Or Avatar: The Way of Water, probably Way of Water, but I think she's really good in both as Neytiri. I think when it comes to like motion capture performances, obviously there are highlights. We always talk about Andy Serkis, especially gets mentions. But I think her as Neytiri is like a really strong emotional mocap performance. I think as the leader and core of this family, especially in Way of Water, I think she has quite a powerful character in those films. I think it's pretty strong. If you want like my full thoughts, highly recommend our Avatar episode where Jack and I reviewed both Avatar films. But I really like her in Avatar. Nick, what are your favorite Zoe Saldana films?
Like, I was looking at her filmography, and I was like, okay, outside of like Avatar, I knew you were going to pick the Avatars. I was like, I do like her as Gamora, I guess. I forgot she was even in the Terminal. I remember she was in Curse of the Black Pearl. That was something for some reason, like she stood out for me in that film. Even like watching it when I was younger, I was like, oh, okay, little thing. I'm gonna go in a very, very unexpected direction, which is gonna shock you. I don't even think you've seen the movie actually. Favorite performance by Zoe Saldana. It's actually the first time I ever was like, "Oh, she's good," and she like captivated me. It we're talking about 2010's The Losers, which is it's like if you were to ask younger Nick, I would have said this is a classic film. Classic film. Apparently, I think its reception and reputation is it's shit. Generally speaking, the Sylvain White film with was it? Yeah, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Chris Evans, Idris Elba, like banger cast. This was one of the first movies where I saw all of these people, back then. And I remember Zoe Saldana in it. She just had a very commanding presence. Like she comes in, she's agile, she's charming, funny, and I was like, damn, she's good. And I think she's kind of done the same thing in most of her career. Shout out as well, another movie of hers that I do like is The Words. Well, honestly, to a lesser extent, I will give you both Colombiana and Live by Night, even though they're very mediocre, even bad movies, but she's very good in them. I think that's the best thing I can say about her, generally speaking. She's not necessarily in the best movies out there outside of Avatar, what I do. And the Guardians movie, the Guardians movies as well, honestly. But she is always very committed, and she takes it in a very serious way. And it's always a joy listening to her talk about her craft, especially what you were saying about the Avatar films, how seriously she took both physically and just emotionally the role of Matiri. So yeah, good actress.
Definitely one of the most like underrated like blockbuster stars. The fact that like at the
Yeah.
same time she was in Star Trek, Avengers, and she was in Avatar, like that's pretty insane. She has like a really kind of stacked filmography. I think like if we looked at like who do we talk about a lot on ClapperCast and stuff, like she'd probably actually be like a sneak surprise in there when we talk about some of the bigger stuff. It's like a bunch of animated films. So like shout out
Book of
Zoe
Life.
Saldana, Book of Life. Yeah,
What's
she's
the
in
problem?
Elio next year. So
Oh.
good stuff, I guess. And she's in Emilia Perez. Dare I say, I'm shocked you didn't go there, but it's okay. So you can let us know on Twitter or on email what your thoughts are on that question. Let's get to our rapid reviews. Anything we have seen recently that we haven't talked about on the podcast. Nick, take it away. What have you seen this week?
In the TV corner of Nick, I've been watching Girls, the HBO show by Lena Dunham. I don't know if you've seen it actually, Carson. Um, it's really good. I'm loving it. I've seen 2 seasons in a week. That's like 20 episodes in a week. I am working technically. I've watched 20 episodes of this show. It's so. I think I'm watching it at the right time for me, because I'm going, as is often the case, existential crisis. What am I going to do with the future and my career, and the growing up and relationships and all of that? To follow these four semi-privileged white girls trying to like make a living and survive in New York, it's actually very relatable and fun in a lot of ways. Adam Driver in this is amazing. It is just like absolutely like steals every scene he's in. He has such chaotic energy, which is always a delight. But yeah, so girls have been really loving. Fantastic cameos as well. There's like an episode with just Patrick Wilson, which I loved. There's so many, like Griffin Dunn in another episode. John Cameron Mitchell pops up a couple of times. I'm like, oh, what? I had to pause. I was like, is that him? And I had to go IMDb. I was like, that's him in this fucking show. Oh, that's amazing. Like, honestly, highly recommend. Ben Mendelsohn in another episode. Girls, watch Girls. I think it's better than people said back then. Um, Outside of this, I've watched No Other Land. Finally, the documentary. Watched it in the cinema. Fun times. Girl next to me brought popcorn. She stopped eating like after 10 minutes in. Like, girl, what were you thinking? Honestly. I don't think I've ever felt such a bad vibe leaving a movie theater from the audience. Everyone looked depressed. I felt depressed. I felt like I genuinely couldn't breathe at one point during it. I would say it's worth seeking out if you can in cinemas. I would honestly recommend watching it at home if possible, because it's probably less intense in a good way. It was definitely very overwhelming seeing it on the big screen. Fuck you to the cinema chain here in Germany that put out this message in front of the film, like, it's a complicated issue. We're not taking sides. This is just one side of the story. We're not taking. It's like, fuck off. Just fuck off. They're like, oh, we don't endorse anti-Semitism, which is very ironic considering there's that element in the documentary as well, where someone's like telling to the Israeli journalist, like, oh, you're an anti-Semite. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, this has nothing to do with it. Like, why are you spinning your story like that? So yeah, No Other Land, absolutely, like you said, Carson, one of the most important films to watch this year, maybe the movie to watch this year. A big disappointment. A couple of like films that I enjoyed but were a bit of a disappointment were the documentary Wise Guy on David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, which is a two-parter on HBO. It's very flat, very messy the way it's structured. There's way more Drea de Matteo than I was expecting and hoping for, considering her controversies over the past few years, politically and just career-wise. But yeah, it's always nice to hear stories about The Sopranos and how some things came to be from the creator himself. And I watched The Wild Robot. I don't remember what your opinion is on that one. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it at all. I
Exactly the
was
same.
shocked that it's this beloved, honestly, because I think it is, and pains me to say it, but it is very much a children's film in a
Mm-hmm.
negative way. It's very childish. It's very simple and simplistic. Outside of some elements about what it means to be a parent and to have a child and seeing him and them grow up in life, it's like, oh, it's so touching. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's it. That's it. Everything else,
Yeah.
the way the story is portrayed, it's People throw a lot of shit at Illumination. This is not that different in some ways, you know. They have a very cringy montage with a pop song during it. The movie basically ends and then keeps going for another 40 minutes. So it's like,
Hmm.
why do we need this? I was very disappointed by it. It was overall cute. It's like, oh, there's a couple of cute animals, you know, but it was just, there's so much talking in it. There's so many famous actors just giving voice. It was just distracting. I don't know. Maybe I watched it on the wrong
Hmm.
day,
Oh no,
but it's
I'm right.
just
I'm exactly with you. Up
okay.
into now I remember. I forgot you watched it. Didn't you in your letterbox review mention like the animation style you're getting over? Like
So
I
tired,
agree
man.
completely with that. Also, like I echo your thoughts. Like it was fine. It was not bad, but it was definitely like if I was sitting there and everyone around me was sobbing, I'd be like, are you guys okay? Like, it's very just like simplistic. It's very
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. I think that's like when what was the enter? I don't remember the first Spider Verse movie came out. I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Into the across into the Spider Verse. When that came out, it was fresh and new. This style of animation, and it still is honestly because there's so much artistry behind it. Adds off to all of the animators on those films. But then, like, oh, Puss in Boots now has the style. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has the style.
Hmm.
I remember it was like another movie last year that also had this style, and now well, Robot has like why is everyone now copying it? This is the new like oh Shrek is popular, let's make 3D animated movies. Like I don't know, which is especially insulting in this case because this is based on a children's book, series of children's books, which have some lovely animation, some lovely drawings
Drawings.
in them. Just look them up, listeners. They're amazing. I want a movie in that style. Like, make it actual 2D, make it hand drawn, make it simpler, smaller scale, more intimate, instead of having this sort of bloated action climax at the end. It's never ending. So many robots. Like, oh, I don't know.
Did you ever see Robot Dreams?
No, which I hate myself
You
for it.
should. You
I
should.
I
It's
think I love
like
it.
it's how everyone describes Wild Robot is how I describe that film where I'm like, I am sobbing in it. I am we almost did on ClapperCast for like a hot second and then it got removed. But one day maybe because I sobbed during that film each time.
I want to. I
Um
really want to. It's one of those movies I got lost a little bit.
yeah.
And then super quickly, I watched The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, which is a documentary that I
Oh,
recommend. Did you watch this one actually?
yes, I did.
I really liked it, and like it hit me personally as someone who was big on. I mean, still is big on video games. It's a very nice, good hobby of mine, but especially during high school, it was
Mhm.
very cathartic and helpful to have video games as an outlet to kind of like not experience some of the pains of living during high school. Dark times indeed. And this one goes to those very tragic extremes of what it means to like have a very very terrible disability and using technology to cope with it and to actually do
Mhm.
something with it. And there are so many parts of this that just had me sobbing. I was like watching this in my apartment.
Mhm.
It's like the mother who manages to connect with her autistic son thanks to this kid. Well, kid guy like was 24 when he passed away, so it feels weird to say the kid, this teenager, like he was an adult still, but
Yeah.
those like the way he discovered love through the game and the way he constantly tried to help other people but never truly accepted his like it was so painful, man, just so painful. It really hit me in
Mhm.
the feels, a bit manipulative we could say potentially, but I mean it is an inspiring
Mhm.
story nonetheless. And lastly, I went to the cinema two more times to rewatch two 1999 films. As I mentioned previously, they're doing the
Oh.
1999 retrospective, and I watched one of my top 20 favorite films of all time, Eyes Wide Shut, on the big screen. It was a delight. The crowd laughed. They get it. They get it's a funny film at its core, but in the appropriate moments. And then yesterday I watched the Blair Witch Project on the big screen at an
How
almost
cool.
midnight screening, and I genuinely love this film now. It's a movie that I watched back in 2016 when I had a fever. It felt like the right time to watch it. I had the
Oh
worst
yeah.
nightmares of my life after it, genuinely, like fever fueled. It was amazing in its own way. And watching it like in the cinema with a crowd, like there's all those moments when it's just like pitch black and they can barely see in the forest, you can barely see in the forest, and it did get to me. It has a primal fear and such unpolished look, which I think no found footage film has truly captured this well since. Especially the whole idea, I think the glowing moment of that film for me is when they're running away from their tents in the woods. Minor spoiler for the film. But like one of the girl Heather is like screaming, "What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?" And they actually had like a witch, like creature monster, like a person dressed up or like a thing floating in the with the trees or something like that that she was supposed to capture on camera, but she actually didn't because it was too dark and she was running away and she just forgot basically. And that's perfection. Like every single other stupid ass found
Yeah.
footage film that comes out since, it's like cleanly shot, super like get a nice shot of the action, get a nice monster, wanna miss it. Instead, this one feels real, feels raw, and I was like, love the Blair
Because it
Witch
like
Project.
was. They just threw the actors out in the wilderness and like terrorized them. Love it. The iconic scene of him turning around and zoomed up. Like it wasn't supposed to be zoomed in. It was just like naturally zoomed in and they didn't want to tell the person. Like that is genius. Like it is just
Yes.
real. They would like literally just mess with them in the night while they're sleeping in their tents and like chase them through the woods. Like it's incredible. It's just again like another thesis of this podcast is like simplicity is best a lot of the times. Like when you just
Yes.
really go out there and you don't have to craft this big thing, if you just shoot simply and shoot as raw as humanly possible, you get the best results. I think that is such a fantastic showcase of it. It's a film that like still holds up. I
Yes.
get why some people are bored watching it, but like for me, I agree with you. I'm just like fully on the edge of my seat, like in it.
And I was watching it
Great.
with a friend who hadn't seen it in full, and they were like, this movie was short. It's like this was quick. Like it just goes by that, and it's true. It's so well paced. It's so well paced, and I will genuinely say, like from now on, whenever there's conversations about like horror actors, performances, blah blah blah, I'm gonna say Heather Donahue in the Blair Witch Project, and that's like the last thing I will say about this. And closing the chapter is like movie from 1999 that stars a female direct, like protagonist is a female director who constantly gets shut upon by her two crew members who belittle her throughout and do pull jokes on her and whenever they film her, the way it's uncomfortable and the use of the camera and just the male gaze and the way she films things, it's so I think there's so much still that can be mined thematically from the Blair Witch. Just like watching it felt like watching it again for the first time. It was so amazing. I love that film so much, and it made me retroactively despise the 2016 like reboot from Blumhouse. Fucking
Out of
hated it.
Wingard, right?
Just
Yeah.
I watched that when it came out, and I was like, this isn't good. And now thinking about it, I was like, that was terrible. That was absolutely trash. Oh well, it was a nice week. It was a very nice week of movie watching. I'm curious to know what you watched, Carson.
Okay. Let's. I feel like there's that scene in Mission Impossible is in the trailer, Mission Impossible Fallout, where he like gets ready. He's like, okay, I'm gonna fight. Like, let's get through this list because
Reload.
it's long. Better Man, the Robbie Williams biopic, where he is played by a real photorealistic CGI chimpanzee. Director of The Greatest Showman, has a lot better song sequences than Emilia Pérez. Look,
Okay.
it is definitely basic to some level, but there's like a real amount of vulnerability here from Robbie Williams, who's like, yeah, I was an absolute piece of shit, and here's all my inner demons. And we're gonna use the CGI ape to like. There's a scene where the CGI ape fights like his demons in like a action sequence. It
Ooh.
got me. I'm not gonna lie, not the best film of the year, but like definitely I was like, hell yeah, this is great. Fascinating comparing this and Piece by Piece, the Pharrell Williams Lego biopic from this year, because both are biopics for working artists who change the visual representation of themselves, one through Lego, one through a chimpanzee. This film is like everything that you would want from this genre. Piece by Piece is like an embarrassment compared to this, but I actually really, really dug this film.
It's like a proper
Unstoppable.
fiction film, right? That's because
Yeah, it
I.
is.
Okay, fascinating, fascinating. I'm even more interested in watching it now.
I would recommend it. Like it's somewhat basic. It's a biopic, right? You're not going to get shocked, but like it does go places. I think like Jack would give this 5 stars, to be honest. Unstoppable. I don't know the name of the guy. This is from Amazon. This is about a wrestler, a college wrestler who doesn't have one leg, but he still pushes forward. I thought this was bad. Not only is it like just incredibly basic, but it's like so bad at creating like emotional thesis and creating like logic from a character standpoint. Really did not vibe with that one. Out on Netflix now, probably the film we should have chose to review, the adaptation of August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, directed by Malcolm Washington, the son of Denzel Washington. Really, really like this one. I really like Fences. I was a little bit cold on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but this one takes this idea of like a family who obviously has a lot of trauma, both just like in their bloodline and also just within themselves personally. And it's a question of how do you move on? What demons do you keep around and are you thoughtful of and do you remember? And what do you exercise? I thought it was perfectly cinematic where it is a family drama, but there's also like supernatural elements, but those played in really well. The performances here are all incredible. This is one of the best ensembles of the year. Sad this one's not getting more praise because I really think it is fantastic. It is again out on Netflix. I went to the premiere of Y2K this week randomly. Kyle Mooney and Tony Hawk were randomly there introducing the film. A horror comedy about like what if Y2K made all of our electronics evil and killing machines. It was fine. It was cute. Definitely fun. I think especially if you were alive at the time, you will have a lot of nostalgia for a lot of in this film. There are definitely some really, really funny moments. Fred Durst is incredible in this film. Fred Durst is in it as Fred Durst, and he's really funny.
It's his year.
Definitely more of a simple genre film. I would not like expect anything wild from this, but fun for what it was. I finally bought into the hype. Everyone convinced me I watched Beetlejuice. It was bad. I don't like the original Beetlejuice. I don't like this Beetlejuice. But Tim Burton, the production design, the costume designs, this practical filmmaking. Let's keep this energy going because I'll admit that was really good. And I would love to see you do like a good script or a better character with this vibe. Keep it going, Tim Burton. But no, I did not like this. I watched Smile 2. I like Smile, the original. I really didn't like this film. I'll be like honest, really at all. I think it really does not understand why this story is scary. It becomes very, very heavily like, is everything a dream? Is everything paranoia? Is everything fantasy? And a point that it was just like, it was really not fun to follow. It wasn't scary. Performances were fine, but this did very little for me. The animated film Chicken for Linda, if anyone wants like a really fun animated film from this year, it's currently streaming on the Criterion channel, premiered at Cannes, I want to say last year, but it all looks like it's painted. It's a very simplistic story. It feels like a children's storybook at times, of this young girl who mother yells at her and then the mother feels bad. So she's like, okay, I'm going to cook you a chicken dinner, but the store is not open and we don't have chicken. So we have to go steal this chicken. And it just keeps evolving in a way like a children's storybook evolves. Again, I would not be like an emotionally poignant, you're going to be crying at the end, but I had a lot of fun with this. If you want like a lighter animated watch, would recommend. I watched Clint Eastwood's Juror Number 2. Good. Not great, but good. Definitely had some fun twists and turns. If you like a really fun, engaging courtroom drama that like has really idiotic characters making crazy mistakes, and you just want to be yelling at the screen like with anxiety, like what are you doing? It's a fun premise. A guy goes to jury duty. He's hearing this case of murder, and he's like, wait a minute. I think I actually murdered this person. I think I accidentally hit this person with my car and kill them, and they think it's this guy. So he's like, what do I do? Do I tell them like I think he's innocent, but then they're going to investigate and find me? And he just makes like such baffling decisions, and you just want to like scream. The film starts to say something about like the justice system, right? Can we have justice in our current society? I don't know if it really lands anything there, but like for a Clint Eastwood film made in 2024, this is good. Possibly his last film also. So like if you get the chance to see it in theaters, go see it. You know, I don't know, even if it's not perfect, why not? The Last Showgirl, starring Pamela Anderson, Gia Coppola directs. Love this film. one of my favorites of the year, 5 stars. What an emotionally beautiful look at community and connection. This older woman has been working as a showgirl her entire life. Her venue is closing down. No one will hire her. So she has to figure out what she's going to do. And she's connecting with her daughter, who has some trauma there between the two. Really, really well done. Pamela Anderson gives like a stunning performance here. Dave Bautista is great. Jamie Lee Curtis, who everyone knows I don't like Jamie Lee Curtis normally. She is great in this film.
Yeah, she was in
I
it.
think she's also like iconic. There's a scene of her like with this wig and like a cocktail dress, like dancing on it. It's iconic. This film is so fun and it's also so heartbreaking. I cried through it. It's not just a tale of these individuals, these older individuals, seeing their days dying out, but just seeing like this slice of Americana die out at the same time. It's almost like a ghost town as they walk around Las Vegas and they see just how like society has changed, and in a changing society, where is their place in it? Oh, just like I thought this was fantastic. I wasn't a big fan of mainstream, but Gia Coppola knocks it out of the park here. Steve McQueen's Blitz was fine. I don't know. Saoirse Ronan was good here. Very simple in a way. This almost feels like it's more mature than a kid's film, but it feels it almost has like the narrative of a kid's film. A large part of this is her son is on a train and then like gets off at this random station and then like is lost and is trying to find his way home. Didn't do a lot for me, but I think it's streaming on Apple TV Plus, or it will be soon. Robert Zemeckis is here is terrible, an interesting, I guess, experiment in editing and narrative. But God, Tom Hanks literally like triggered my fight or flight during this film. Fucking atrocious. And then finally, I'm not going to get into it fully because we have a full episode coming in January. I did see Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' new film. Good, really good. Super dark. This is not a sexy vampire film in the slightest. It returns this character and this narrative to like true darkness and just pure horror. Not that there isn't sex and sexuality within this film, but it's just not redeeming of a vampire. It's just dark, in a way that like I would not have too high of expectations because it doesn't transcend the Nosferatu narrative, right? This is definitely a remake stuck to this narrative, which isn't bad. It's incredibly well made and engaging within that, but just going with the right expectations. I really wish Eggers, and I like all of his work, but like there was something when he was doing something super original with The Witch and The Lighthouse where he was hitting up here, and then he went to The Northman, and which I didn't really like, and then he went to Nosferatu, which I do like, but like it's just a little bit of a step down. I wish he would go back to kind of more original narratives. But I'm very excited for everyone to see this film, and I'm really excited to talk about the film. Specifically, I want to mention Lily Rose Depp is like career defining here. Love her, love her, love her.
Nice.
And Willem Dafoe, my man, just a blast. I mean, is there another actor working today who's just always consistently such a blast? Yeah, I enjoyed this film and I cannot wait to talk about it more later. So thank you so much for listening today to our Emilia Pérez review. If you want more ClapperCast, Nick, this Thanksgiving, this Thursday, we will be reviewing Paul Schrader's Cat People over on our Patreon. You can get access to that for only a couple bucks a month. Also on that episode, we have an announcement for the upcoming schedule for ClapperCast. So I'm not going to say here what's going to be happening next time we're here on the main feed. But just know in December, we have some fun plans happening and you can learn about that over on our Patreon this Thursday. So Nick, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Blue Sky and Instagram at NickyGra97, and you can also find me on YouTube and Vimeo at Enjoy the Movies to see all my short films and projects and things that I do in my free time.
And you can find me on both Letterboxd and Blue Sky at Carson Timar. Find us on ClapperCast on Twitter at ClapperPodcast. Subscribe to our Patreon. Again, bonus monthly episodes. We have tons of reviews. Nick, we had our whole John Couture series. We have done a John Waters double feature, a Terrence Malick double feature, which if you ever watch these episodes and you're like, oh, I really want to see like more drama between the guests. I want to see them like fight each other on their thoughts and really get into like differing opinions. Our Terrence Malick episode's like a full on like fight at a point. Highly recommend. If you ever look at this podcast, I don't know why you would, and you say, God, I wish they reviewed Marvel. Our Deadpool and Wolverine episode is on our Patreon. And like I said, this week, you know I'm a big Paul Schrader stan, and we're reviewing Cat People. So I'm very excited for that episode. You can find it on there this Thanksgiving. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving week, and we will be back in a couple weeks right here for a really exciting review that we will announce this week on Patreon. See you then. Goodbye.